Hello, and welcome to episode 6 of the Yes You Coaching podcast. I'm your host, Anna Manning, the founder of Yes You Coaching, and I am here to talk to you about confidence. Today, we're going to be talking about high and low confidence cycles. So, you may never have heard of that before. That's because I've just recently coined this as a term. So, when I'm working with people on confidence, I am usually working with very capable professional women who are good at their job, right? So, you think that they would be confident because they're good at their job, right? They know what they're doing, they produce good results, they have had promotions, right? But they're not as confident as they want to be. So, what is going on? Often they don't really know what's going on. And very often a client will say to me, do you know, it's ridiculous really because I've had a promotion. Nobody ever complains about my work. I've continued to do well. So the fact that they're in that position, so to all intents and purposes, they're doing really well, but they don't feel as confident as they want to. They think it's ridiculous or it's a bit silly, or they just kind of don't get a lot of the time what is really going on that is creating that low confidence. And most of them will just assume that it, there's something kind of just about them, which means that they're just not as confident as they could be. Like maybe they weren't born with it, or maybe they're just not one of those types of people. But when I dig into it with a client, what I see and what I help them to see is that there are some really specific patterns which erode confidence, which create low confidence. And there are some really specific patterns that create high confidence. So I'm going to talk to you today about what those specific patterns are. And I'm thinking of them in terms of a cycle. So there's like a vicious cycle that erodes your confidence, but there's also like a nice cycle, a virtuous cycle, if you were, that will increase your confidence. So let's hope I can get through this episode because I seem to have some kind of horrible cough this week. I may just put a cough sweet in my mouth at some point. I'll stop to drink a bit of tea. But as they say in show business, the show must go on. So first, we're going to look at a low confidence cycle. And there's three kind of main headings that I see within this. And this is after crunching. Is that a word? Coaching literally hundreds of women in confidence. I see the same thing again and again and again. And I've distilled it into these three areas. So a confidence cycle that erodes confidence, so a low confidence cycle, usually includes quite a bit of self-criticism and self-judgment. It usually includes very high standards. And it usually includes a failure to acknowledge good work. So that is the three parts that I'm using to show you what a low confidence cycle looks like. And if you're already thinking, that does sound like me, then listen up, because this is going to show you exactly why your confidence is lower than you want it to be. And I can tell you that it's not silly and it's not ridiculous. But when these things are present, it's almost impossible for your confidence to be higher. So the first one we're going to look at that's in the cycle of low confidence is self-criticism and self-judgment. So most people who come to me will say, oh yeah, I am my own worst critic, right? I'm quite critical of myself. I'm quite critical of anything that I get wrong. I'm quite critical of anything I'm not perfect at. For instance, I was coaching somebody this morning who was terrified because she had to give a presentation and then do a Q&A in front of like a whole room of people. And I said, what are you going to say to yourself after the event if this doesn't go the way you want, or if you make a mistake? She's like, oh, it's going to be terrible. I'm going to beat myself up, etc. Right? Very difficult for you to be confident when you know that there's somebody who's going to be really critical to you if things don't go exactly perfect. Now, in this scenario, that someone happens to be you, but actually, in reality, that doesn't make a difference. If you're being very self-critical, that is part of the cycle that will erode your confidence. So your self-criticism might be scaring you before you do something, like it was in my client's incidents this morning. It might also be henpecking you in the middle of doing things. So a lot of clients will tell me, I find it very difficult to focus when I'm doing something because my brain's like, oh my God, you got that wrong. Oh, that didn't sound good. Right in the middle of you doing something. So imagine that my client is presenting and she's getting heckled by the audience during that presenting, right? They're like, yeah, that was shit. Well, that was rubbish. That didn't make any sense, right? She's literally being heckled from inside her own head. So you can see why it would be difficult to be confident. I mean, maybe some people still can be confident when they're being, heckled, but it's difficult, right? It's going to throw most people off. So when your brain's being mean to you before, heckling you during, and it's going to give you a hard time afterwards, very difficult to be confident. And you can see why. Imagine you had a boss that was like, right, you're going to do this presentation. You're probably going to be shit at it. You better not make any mistakes. You've got to get this right. Everything's riding on your shoulders. And you're not very good at presentations, are you? Just not really one of those kind of people. Before the presentation, right, how nervous would you feel? You wouldn't feel confident. Then during the presentation, they were sat at the side heckling you, telling you how crap you were. And then afterwards, they beat you up for any tiny little thing that went wrong. I think it's pretty obvious that you wouldn't be feeling very confident in that scenario. Well, exactly the same thing's happening when you are doing that to yourself. So, the other thing that is part of this self-criticism and self-judgment that is part of the cycle of eroding your confidence is really keenly focusing on how you're being perceived by other people. So I spoke to somebody just this week, actually, and she told me that while she is presenting, she knows what she wants to say. She has a summary of information that she wants to share, but the whole time her head's saying to her, oh, you're losing them. Oh, look at their faces. Are they enjoying this? Maybe they're not. Maybe you're not articulating your words properly. She is literally putting thoughts into their head and imagining what they're thinking, how they're judging her, how they're perceiving her. And while she's completely focused on that, it's really difficult for her to simultaneously be focused on what she's actually doing. So part of the low confidence cycle that I see is a real focus on how you're being judged and how other people are perceiving you. It's really, really difficult to just relax and be natural and be yourself if you're constantly thinking, oh, I have to amend this, I have to adapt that. Oh, how are they reacting? How are they responding? Right? How can you stay present and do whatever it is you're trying to do, deliver the message that you're trying to deliver when you're completely focused on how other people are perceiving you? It is incredibly difficult. I think it's like trying to, do a presentation while at the same time you're doing a handstand. And it also loses you connection with the people that you're talking to because you're not really with them anymore. When you're solely focused on how you're being perceived, you're in your own head. You've lost connection to them completely. So this is the first part of the cycle I see that erodes confidence, and it's to do with self-criticism, and it's to do with judgment and a focus on how other people are perceiving you. So the next part of the cycle is around having really high standards. Now, Not necessarily a bad thing, right? You have high standards for the work that you do. You have high standards for the clients that you support, whoever that is, right? You pride yourself on doing good work and a good job. Great. But sometimes this can be maybe a little bit on overdrive, and it can look like standards which, in the busyness of your working day, you may not very easily be able to achieve. It's very difficult to have high confidence when you have a standard which demands that everything be perfect or almost perfect. How easy is it in the context of your job and your life and your day to get everything perfect? It's very difficult. And if you struggle with perfectionism, go back and listen to episode 5, where we talk about working with perfectionism. But what I see when people are in this kind of low confidence cycle is that things have to be perfect. That's their standard. And they really will struggle to tolerate failure, mistakes, setbacks. Like they're crushing to them. And none of us like to have, none of us like to get things wrong. None of us like to fail. None of us like to have setbacks. But it's the nature of life, especially if we're pushing the boundaries, which you probably are. You're trying something new, you're stepping up, maybe you're in a new position, maybe you're in a new role, maybe you take on a new piece of work. You cannot get everything perfect in that context. It's impossible. Or maybe you're in an area where you're breaking new ground and there isn't a path that's been laid out before you. There isn't a perfect process you can follow. Like you're literally hacking through the jungle with a machete. There's going to be mistakes, there's going to be failures, there's going to be setbacks. But if you're completely unable to tolerate those, you will be in this low confidence cycle. If any little thing that goes wrong or if anything isn't perfect, that erodes your confidence and your sense of identity and your sense of worthiness in terms of your ability to do your job. You're going to find it really difficult to be confident. I actually did a LinkedIn post about this yesterday, and I was saying very often we focus on how other people are perceiving us. But a lot of the time, the problem is how we are actually perceiving us. So you might make a mistake mean that you're rubbish at your job, you're not qualified to be there, you're an imposter, you're a fraud. If you're making that mean that, that is going to be hard to be confident because it's going to happen. Unless you try and control everything by working, however many hours a day so that you can perfect everything to the nth degree. But what does that lead to? Burnout. That doesn't lead to confidence either. So you're stuck in this kind of cycle within a cycle where everything has to be perfect, but you can't get everything perfect. And that erodes your sense of self-confidence. The other thing around having high standards in this confidence cycle is to do with comparison. So when I'm working with clients, I often find out part of the low confidence cycle for them is negatively comparing themselves to other people. And that might sound like, oh, well, they've got it all together. They seem to be able to do everything perfectly. They're not really nervous before they do this thing. They can bullshit, they can wing it. I hear that a lot. Oh, I just can't do that. I have to know everything. I can't wing it. If that sounds like you, and you're making those kinds of comparisons between you and people maybe you work with or other people in your industry, think about how that makes you feel. It's going to erode your confidence because none of that is like seeing what you can do and what you can add and what you do and what you do add. It's just, oh dear, look at them, they're better than me, and I'm like lower on the pecking order, or I'm not as good, whatever, of course that's going to erode your confidence. If you're comparing yourself to other people and assuming that they don't have any of these worries, they don't have any of these problems, you're not going to feel as confident. Imagine if your boss was saying to you, oh, well, Becky never has that problem, she's really got this sorted. I don't really know what's going on with you, right? Imagine if they were directly comparing you to other people as a method of put down. It'd feel terrible. You wouldn't feel confident. So comparison is another thing that keeps people kind of trapped in this low confidence cycle. The third part of the cycle is around a failure to acknowledge good work. Now, I see this all of the time with my clients who aren't as confident as they want to be. They find it really easy to tell me all the stuff they're really bad at, and they find it incredibly difficult, even excruciating, to tell me all the stuff that they are good at. So every coaching session that I have with every single client, at the end of the session, I check in with them and ask them, how are you feeling? And then I ask them, is there anything you'd like to acknowledge yourself for? And that means anything you want to pat yourself on the back for, anything that you just want to acknowledge that you're proud of. And many of my clients are like, no. Really, really struggle with this question. Really struggle to acknowledge themselves, even though they do loads of really good work. Loads of really good work. I have just seen them do 60 minutes of really good work, and they can't drag anything out of their head which they'd like to acknowledge themselves for. Now imagine again that you were in a working environment where nobody ever acknowledged anything good that you did. Right? No one ever said, oh yeah, that was good. Well done with that. You are literally creating this environment in your own head. And there's often a link between a failure to acknowledge ourselves and a desire to have that acknowledgement from other people. So often my clients will tell me, I don't really get that much acknowledgement anymore because I'm pretty senior now, but I would like it if my boss would kind of, give me more feedback, give me more praise, as it were, let me know I'm on the right track. Now, it's easy to see why that would be a nice thing, right? Because everybody likes a bit of praise. Everybody likes a pat on the head, But we can't control whether or not other people give it to us. So if they stay silent, we may assume that means they're not happy, or they think, oh, maybe she's not doing her job that well. I coached a client a while ago who said, well, my boss doesn't give me any feedback, so I just, and he hasn't said anything. So I don't know whether I'm doing a good job. And I was like, okay, well, how about you just make that decision for yourself? Is anything going wrong? No. Are your team complaining? No. Are your projects progressing? Yes. Well, let's just have that as the benchmark of whether you're doing a good job, shall we? Let's not rely on some external thing to tell us that we're doing a good job. In fact, let's insource that job that we've been outsourcing. But what I see with clients who are struggling with their confidence, and it's part of this low confidence cycle, is a refusal to acknowledge any of the good work that they're doing. So like a withholding of that, but really also at the same time having a desire to have other people acknowledge them. So that's the low confidence cycle. And now I want to take you through a high confidence cycle, a confidence building cycle. Because if you're going to grow your confidence, you have to get from the low cycle to the high cycle. And this is what the higher confidence cycle looks like. It's a cycle that will grow your confidence. And this has got 3 prongs as well. And the first one is that you're kinder to yourself. So I'm going to suggest you decide how you want to be managed. Like, what gets the best out of you in terms of management? Is it someone who is encouraging and supportive? Someone who reminds you of the good work that you do? Is it someone that you can, go to for a bit of comfort? What does that look like? And then do that for yourself. And any places where you're being really harsh or judgy or self-critical, you want to find a way to tone that down. You can go back and listen to, I think it's episode 3, which is about quieting your inner critic, because it's a key part of this confidence cycle, which will increase your confidence. The other thing that I think is a key part of this is learning how to handle yourself on days where you don't feel that great. So we're going to have them, right? Days where you just, you don't feel that great and things aren't working for you. Maybe you're feeling quite emotional. Maybe it's the first day of your period, so you're just always feeling shit. How can you be kind to yourself on those days? How can you give yourself what you need? Most people tell me they just power through. Smack a happy thought on it, slap a positive affirmation on it. Well, I don't really think that works. So what could you do for yourself instead? How could you be really kind to yourself on those bad days? So what this does, if you are able to be kinder to yourself, to tone down some of the critical thinking and to turn up the encouragement and the support and the understanding, is it reduces fear and panic. So imagine if you've got somebody who's really supportive and kind, it enables you to feel calmer, right? The same thing happens when you do it to yourself, and that promotes confidence. The other thing that this does, once you're kinder to yourself and you get into you're getting into this confidence cycle, this higher confidence cycle, is it enables you to try new things, because you can give something a go, maybe that you don't know how to do, or that maybe you've never done before. So that's the first bit of the confidence growing cycle. You must turn down that critical chat inside and find a way to turn up the supporting, understanding, kind, loving chat inside. The second bit of the confidence cycle is to think about those standards that we talked about. So remember I said that often people have really, really, really high standards and they beat themselves up for not reaching them. I want you to really think about what standards are necessary and choose the standards that you're going to use, instead of just using your brain's default, which is like 100% perfect. Everything has to be like this. And if I don't get it right, I'm a piece of shit, That is very confidence eroding. But what's very confidence building is asking yourself, does it need to be perfect? Can I use this as a learning point? And even if something does go wrong, or there is a failure or a setback, not making that mean that you're rubbish at your job, but just being like, okay, well, that sucked, but I can go again, I can retry. I can use this to move forward. Once you're able to tolerate some failure and some setbacks, you're going to find that your confidence increases naturally. The other thing is around reducing comparison. So like staying in your own lane and being like, yeah, Becky can do it. That's great. Maybe I can learn from her, instead of making it mean something negative about you. The next area of the confidence cycle is to be able to acknowledge your own good work. And I said before, when people find this really difficult to do, it doesn't feel great for you to have done loads of good work and have put in loads in your career and then have it completely like explained away by, oh, I was lucky, or, oh, whatever, it was a fluke, right? How mean is that? So what you want to be able to do to get in this cycle of growing your confidence, actually being able to acknowledge the good stuff that you do. Actually, at the end of the day, being like, I do this to myself now. I'm like, Anna, you did a really good job today. You know how motivating that is. You know how nice that is to have somebody tell you at the end of the day, Anna, you did a really good job today. That day was a success. Or even if it was a crap day, well, do you know what? At least you managed to record that podcast when you had a cough. Good on you. You've fought through some tech difficulties that you didn't think you were going to be able to sort out. That is really confidence building. Focusing on purpose on your positives instead of just always looking at the negatives. Because left to its own devices, that's what your brain is going to do. That's literally what it's programmed for. But just like you would focus on the positives and acknowledge the work that anyone in your team does, because you know that that's the way to get the best out of them, believe me, that's the way to get the best out of you too. You are not the special snowflake in this scenario. You're just the same as anyone else. But whilst you may have been relying on other people to acknowledge you and focus on the positive work that you've done, I'm like, I'm going to wait here and they'll acknowledge what I've done and they'll give me a pat on the head. No, take that job back and do it for yourself. You be the one that acknowledges you. You be the one that intentionally focuses on the positives. Believe me, it is a key part of a confidence building cycle. So that's what I've got for you today in terms of the low confidence and high confidence cycles. If you identify with any of this and you would like to grow your confidence, I'm inviting you to come and join us in the Confident at Work program. The next round starts in September 2022 and we're booking now. The work that we do in the Confident at Work program will have you go from that low confidence cycle and all of the behaviors we talked about in there to the high confidence cycle and all of the behaviors that we talked about in there. If you're not as confident as you want to be, it may feel confusing. You may even say it's ridiculous or it's silly or just don't get it. Like, I get it. I know what's going on when people aren't as confident as they want to be because I've heard it from a million people. And I've been able to kind of distill it into this high and low confidence cycle for you here. This program will help you actually identify which of those is true for you and which of those do we need to work on in order to get you from the low confidence cycle and shift you into the high one. Like, it's not magic. It is completely possible. Takes a bit of work. Sometimes a few laughs, sometimes a few little tears, but it's probably the best work you'll ever do. I'm very convinced that this world needs confident women, and a lot of them. I would like to see every woman on this fucking planet be as confident as she possibly could be. Imagine that. Imagine that. Every woman in your workplace is confident as she possibly could be. Imagine that. Well, maybe it starts with you. If you want to feel more confident, I'm inviting you to come and join us in Confident at Work. We would love to have you. You just have a quick call with me, find out whether it's a good fit for you. If it is, we'll get you booked in and you can rest for the summer knowing that in September, you're good to go. If this might be good for other people in your workplace, pass on the details, let them know. Let's create a whole work world full of women who are as confident as they possibly could be, who go from that low confidence cycle into a high confidence cycle and let that build and build and build and build and spill out to everyone else. That's what we want. That's what I'm going for. I'm on a mission. Okay. I don't know. Okay. My partner's playing the piano in the background. What would we do with a drunken sailor? I don't know if you can hear it. Sounds very nice. So that's all I've got for you today. If you want to join Confident at Work or you're thinking about it, get in touch. The details are in the show notes. We'd love to have you. And if not, I wish you well going from a low confidence cycle even into a high confidence cycle this week. And I hope this episode, if it does nothing else, can just help you to understand, like lift the lid a little bit and peer inside to why you might be less confident than you want at work. I'll see you in the next episode. Bye.